You grab a meat pie for lunch, quick, convenient, reliable. You expect meat, proper pastry, something that actually fills you up. Wrong. After digging through ingredient lists, analysing meat percentages, and reading through hundreds of customer complaints, I'm genuinely disturbed by what's being sold as meat pies in the UK. Some of these pies contain less than 25% actual meat. Others are packed with industrial fillers, modified starches, and enough water to make you question if you're eating food or drinking gravy with a pastry lid. This isn't about being picky. This is about knowing what you're actually paying for when you spend £2 to £5 on something labelled as a meat pie. The UK meat pie industry was built on butcher traditions. High meat content, simple pastry, real ingredients. That's been systematically destroyed by corporate cost-cutting and industrial food engineering. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which brands are ripping you off and why they should never touch your plate again. Number 8. Sainsbury's own brand pies. Sainsbury's positions these as reliable everyday food. The packaging is simple, the price is reasonable at around £2 for a standard steak pie, and millions of British families buy them every week trusting the Sainsbury's name. But flip that package over and read the ingredient list. You'll find wheat flour, water, and then heavy rusk use as the third or fourth ingredient. Rusk is dried breadcrumbs used specifically to bulk out meat content so they can use less actual beef. The meat percentage sits around 25 to 28% depending on variety. That means about 3/4 of what you're eating isn't meat. It's water, flour, gravy thickeners, and that rusk filler creating the illusion of substance. The gravy is thick and gelatinous, not because it's been slow cooked with real stock, but because it's been loaded with modified starch to mask the fact there's barely any meat swimming in there. The pastry is made with palm oil, not butter. Palm oil is cheaper, creates that soft, greasy texture, and lacks the flaky richness proper pastry should have. Customers consistently complain about shrinking fillings. One reviewer said they opened a Sainsbury's steak pie expecting a decent lunch and found mostly gravy with a few token pieces of meat. Another described it as paying for pastry with meat-flavoured water inside. When you're buying Sainsbury's own brand pies, you're paying for budget meat content hidden behind industrial thickeners and cheap fats. The reliability you expect from the Sainsbury's name doesn't extend to what's actually inside that pastry shell. Budget pricing hides budget meat, and you're the one losing out. Number 7. Tesco standard meat pies. Tesco loves words like classic and traditional on their standard range packaging. It gives the impression of old-fashioned quality, the kind of pie your grandmother might have made. But the meat percentage tells a different story. Their standard steak pies contain around 28% beef, which is lower than you'd expect for something positioned as a reliable everyday choice. The real problem is texture. Customers describe the filling as mushy with a uniform meat paste feel. There are no visible chunks of stewing steak, no texture variation, just this homogenized slurry that's been processed into submission. That happens when manufacturers use cheaper cuts, mince them down, then bind everything together with modified starch and stabilizers. You're not eating recognizable beef. You're eating engineered meat product. In the ingredient list, you'll find additions like yeast extract and hydrolyzed vegetable protein. These are flavor enhancers added because the actual meat content is too low to provide proper beef flavor on its own. Real steak pie gets its richness from the meat and the cooking process. When a manufacturer needs to add chemical flavor boosters, it's a massive red flag that corners are being cut. The pastry is soft and lacks structure. It tears easily, compresses to nothing, and has that characteristic industrial texture that comes from using vegetable oils instead of proper fats. Guess what? Traditional is just a word on the packaging. It's not a reflection of what's actually inside. Number 6. Wall's Meat Pies. Wall's is a name British families have trusted for generations. The brand has childhood nostalgia built into it. You remember Wall's products from decades ago when quality actually mattered. But ownership has changed hands multiple times, and each transition has brought recipe changes focused on mass production efficiency rather than ingredient quality. The current Wall's meat pies use finely minced meat with a noticeably high fat to protein ratio. When you bite into one, the filling has this greasy, paste-like consistency with very little texture. There are no visible chunks of meat, no satisfying bite, just this smooth, processed filling that tastes more of fat and gravy than actual beef or pork. That's deliberate. Fat is cheaper than lean meat, and the more fat they can include while still calling it a meat pie, the lower their ingredient costs. The pastry is another disaster. It's made with vegetable oils and lacks any proper structure. Customers describe it as too soft, almost soggy, with that greasy mouthfeel that lingers long after you've finished eating. Proper pie pastry should be crisp, flaky, and provide structural support for the filling. Wall's pastry collapses under its own weight. What makes this particularly frustrating is the brand recognition. People buy Wall's pies because they remember when Wall's meant quality, but that quality disappeared years ago, replaced by cost-cutting measures designed to maximize profits from a trusted name. Familiar logos don't guarantee quality. In Wall's case, they're actively hiding behind that logo while selling you inferior products at premium prices. Number 5. Bird's Bakery pork pies. Bird's Bakery operates in the Midlands with a reputation as a local bakery chain. The branding suggests fresh, locally made products with traditional recipes. That local positioning creates trust. People assume a regional bakery prioritizing quality over the mass-market giants. But recent customer backlash tells a very different story about what's actually happening with Bird's products. Multiple long-time customers report that Bird's has undergone recipe downgrades over the past few years. The pork pies that were once reliably good now have issues with texture, filling quality, and overall taste. The most common complaint is the gelatin-heavy texture. Traditional pork pies have jelly made from meat stock that sets around the meat. Bird's pies have this thick, rubbery gelatin layer that overwhelms everything else. One customer described it as biting into flavoured rubber with some meat somewhere underneath. The visible meat chunks have decreased noticeably. Where you used to get proper pieces of seasoned pork, you're now finding more processed filling with less distinct texture. This happens when companies scale up production. They switch from traditional methods to industrial processes that prioritize speed and cost efficiency. The meat gets processed more heavily, the gelatin gets overproduced, and the final product tastes nothing like what built the original reputation. Bird's is facing the classic problem of regional brands trying to compete with national chains. To grow, they need to produce more volume at lower costs. But those cost savings come directly from ingredient downgrades and recipe changes. Local branding can absolutely hide shortcuts, and Bird's has proven that even bakeries with decades of regional loyalty will sacrifice quality when profit pressures increase. Number 4. Holland's meat pies. Holland's positions itself as cheap and filling. The pies are everywhere in northern England, priced to move at around 90 pence to £1.80 depending on size and retailer. That low price point attracts customers looking for quick, affordable meals. But you need to understand what you're actually getting for that money. The meat dilution in Holland's pies is extreme. Their standard meat pies contain around 22 to 23% total meat, with some varieties breaking that down to 17% pork and 5% beef. The rest is water, wheat flour, bread, rusk, and modified starch. You're eating more filler than actual meat in something marketed as a meat pie. The rusk content is particularly high, acting as a sponge to absorb all that water and create bulk without adding expensive protein. The gravy is thick and water-heavy, loaded with salt and MSG-style flavour boosters to make your brain think it tastes better than it does. That's food engineering. When the meat content is this low, manufacturers compensate by ramping up artificial flavouring to create the illusion of a meaty filling. Real beef gravy gets its flavour from the meat itself. Chemical gravy gets its flavour from a laboratory. The pastry is thick but provides a hollow eating experience. It's made with cheap fats, has no flaky texture, and exists purely to contain the watery filling without falling apart. Some customer reviews described eating a Holland's pie as feeling full but not fed. That's exactly right. You've consumed calories and filler, but you haven't actually nourished your body with proper protein or quality ingredients. You feel full, but it's the kind of fullness that comes from eating bread and water, not from eating real food. Number 3. Pukka pies. Pukka has massive brand recognition in the UK. They sponsor sports teams, advertise heavily, and position themselves as the nation's favourite pie. The marketing is everywhere. But when you actually examine what's inside those pies, the gap between branding and reality becomes painfully obvious. Their all-steak pie contains only 28% beef. For something with all steak in the name, having less than a third actual beef is borderline deceptive. The rest is water, gravy thickeners, and fillers. The meat that is present has been processed into a homogenized paste. There's no visible muscle fiber, no texture variation, nothing that resembles actual stewing steak. It's smooth, uniform, and engineered for consistency across thousands of factory-produced pies. The ingredient list includes monosodium glutamate. MSG is a flavor enhancer added specifically because the beef content is too low to provide proper meaty flavor on its own. A single Pukka pie also contains 2.25 grams of salt, which is 38% of your recommended daily salt intake in one meal. That's not seasoning. That's salt loading designed to mask inferior ingredients with overwhelming saltiness. What's particularly frustrating is how Pukka trades on brand popularity while delivering mediocre substance. People buy Pukka pies because everyone else buys them, because the name is familiar, because they've seen it sponsored on football shirts. But popularity is absolutely not proof of quality. It's proof of effective marketing. When you're paying £2.50 to £3 for a Pukka pie, you're paying for that marketing, not for proper meat content or quality ingredients. Number 2. Ginsters meat pies. Ginsters is the ultimate convenience brand. You grab them at service stations, corner shops, anywhere you need something quick. The positioning is grab and go, food for people on the move who don't have time for a proper meal. But that convenience positioning reveals everything about what Ginsters prioritizes, and it's not your nutrition or ingredient quality. The industrial production behind Ginsters pies is designed for one thing: shelf life. These pies need to survive days or weeks of transport, storage, and sitting on shelves. To achieve that, manufacturers load them with stabilizers, emulsifiers, and water-binding agents. The ingredient list reads like a chemistry experiment. You'll find multiple E numbers, modified starches, and preservatives designed to keep these pies from going bad for extended periods. The meat content suffers dramatically as a result. When shelf life is the priority, fresh quality meat becomes a liability. It spoils too quickly. So Ginsters uses heavily processed meat bound together with all those chemicals and fillers. In fact, multiple customers report biting into Ginsters pies and finding primarily gristle instead of actual meat. One described it as revolting farm slurry in pastry. That's not an exaggeration. That's someone describing what they actually experienced. Consumer trust erosion around Ginsters is massive. Long-time customers who remember when these pies were acceptable now refuse to buy them. The recipe has clearly changed over the years, prioritizing cost-cutting and extended shelf life over anything resembling food quality. These pies are designed for transport and storage, not for nourishment. When you buy Ginsters, you're eating engineered food product that happens to be shaped like a pie. Number 1. Frey Bentos. This is the most controversial pie in Britain. Frey Bentos has been around since the 1960s, and the tinned pie format became iconic. Generations of British families kept these tins in their cupboards for quick meals. The nostalgia factor is enormous, but what's actually inside those tins today is a complete betrayal of everything a meat pie should be. The meat percentage is shockingly low. Frey Bentos steak and kidney pie contains only 23% meat total, broken down to 12% beef and 11% kidney. Less than a quarter of the pie is actual meat. Everything else is water, gravy, and pastry. But calling it gravy is generous. It's a gel-like substance made from palm oil, modified starch, and thickening agents designed to create volume without adding expensive protein. The gravy dominance is the real problem. When you open a Frey Bentos tin and remove the pastry lid, you're confronted with this thick, gelatinous liquid with a few token pieces of meat floating in it. Customers describe finding just 2 or 3 actual meat chunks in an entire pie. The rest is this heavily thickened sauce that's been engineered to look and feel like proper filling when it's mostly water and chemicals. The pastry is a gimmick. The famous puff pastry lid looks impressive in marketing photos, but it's the only part of the pie that receives any attention. The actual filling underneath is ignored, replaced with the bare minimum needed to legally call it a meat pie. What makes Frey Bentos the worst offender is the combination of maximum nostalgia and minimum substance. They're trading entirely on memories of what these pies used to be while selling you something completely different. This is a pie in name only. It's a tin of thickened water with pastry on top, sold to people who remember when Frey Bentos actually meant quality. Here's how to protect yourself. Check the meat percentage first. If it's under 30%, you're paying for filler and gravy, not actual meat. Real meat costs real money, and if the pie is cheap, something else is providing that bulk. Second, scan the ingredient list for rusk or textured vegetable protein. These are cheap, bulking agents used specifically to reduce meat content while maintaining volume. Third, watch for modified starch appearing early in the ingredient list. It means the filling is mostly thickened liquid rather than actual meat chunks. Look at where water appears in the ingredients. If water is listed before or immediately after meat, you're eating watered-down filling held together with industrial thickeners. And pay attention to pastry ingredients. Palm oil and vegetable oils instead of butter or lard means cheap industrial fats that taste greasy and lack proper texture. The price test is crucial. Genuine meat costs money. If a steak pie costs less than £2, the mathematics don't work. Something cheaper is filling that pie instead of proper beef. Next time you pick up a pie, read that label. Count the actual meat percentage. Look at those ingredients, then ask yourself if you're really paying for meat or just paying for marketing wrapped around water and flour. You deserve better than engineered fillers and corporate deception. You deserve actual food. If this video opened your eyes to what's really in supermarket pies, share it with everyone who still trusts these brands. Like and subscribe because I'm exposing more food industry scams that are ripping off British consumers. See you in the next one.